The Hebrides, a tripper's commentary. I paid 2 visits this year, in April and July, to the outer islands of the Hebrides. Before visiting them, I had not realized that nearly all the islanders speak Gaelic, and that their language is integral to their life. Owing to my ignorance of their language, I was unable to become intimate with the lives of the people. I write about them, therefore, as a tripper who was disappointed and tantalized by the islands and seduced by them only to be reminded that on that soil he will always be an outsider. I doubt if I shall visit the Western Isles again. Apart from my sentimental reluctance to be an outsider, I do not wish to visit them again because they are in a decline. London also is in a decline, but there I feel that I am present at a family sickbed, if not indeed a family deathbed. By blood, I may be nearer to a Hebridean than to a Cockney, but my whole upbringing has alienated me from that natural, some will call it primitive culture, which in the British Isles today is only found on the Celtic or backward fringes. I went to the Hebrides partly hoping to find that blood was thicker than ink, that the Celt in me would be drawn to the surface by the magnetism of his fellows. This was a sentimental and futile hope. Once, sitting by a river drinking beer with some Lewismen, while one of them sang a love song in Gaelic, I felt strongly that I belonged to these people and that, for all I cared, London could sink in the mud. But the conviction of alcohol does not last. An island means isolation. The words are the same. We expect in an island to meet with insular vices. What is shocking is to find an island invaded by the vices of the mainland. The Hebrides are now being invaded by commerce, which means that they are falling to the foreigner. This process may be inevitable, but I should prefer to watch it somewhere where it is further advanced, where differences of wealth are of long standing, and where, though the primitive culture has gone, a sophisticated culture has succeeded it. More than one generation is required before a man can be a capitalist with grace. I have heard of a small crofter who cornered the local tweed industry. This was not a nice Arnold Bennett romance of the poor boy making good. The poor boy made 20,000, but the community which gave rise to him and his family is losing independence and character. 160 looms in 2 small villages work for this man alone. The 160 families who used to make their tweed independently are now bound by contract to him. The manner of their work, the amount of their output, are imposed upon them from outside. They all use mechanical steel looms which turn out at least twice the amount of cloth in the time, but not such a good cloth as the wooden handloom. The wool comes to them from the factories ready dyed, and all that they have to do is the weaving. The crofters no longer spin or dye the wool, and, when it is woven, they no longer walk the tweed. The decay of these arts means the disappearance of the songs which attended them, the spinning songs and walking songs. It means, more widely, a great lessening of the worker's pride in his work. Quantity has ousted quality. The tradition in the islands is that a man lives on the land, but by what he gets out of the sea. In the eyes of the world, however, the fisherman-crofter is superannuated, and the world sends up its trawlers to sweep the fish out of the minch. The islanders of Lewis defeated the efforts of those who wanted them to sacrifice their traditions for an organized commercial prosperity. But it is easier to defeat someone who attends to you than someone who ignores you. The world is going to kill the last of the Celts by ignoring them. When I first visited the islands, I was impertinent enough to resent what I considered the dourness of many of the inhabitants. Most English visitors are sure to be equally impertinent. The natives will not welcome you enthusiastically. They will be polite, considerate, and hospitable, but they will be able to get along better without you than with you. They have not yet acquired the Blackpool mentality. The 7th Duke of Argyll, in a pamphlet, 1883, defending his management of his estate in the island of Tiree, looked forward to the day when the place would be a paradise for visitors and properly equipped with golf courses. Question: where will the natives be then, poor things? Answer: oh, they will be the caddies. The Hebrideans are slow of movement, like most peasants and fishermen, but they are not slow of speech or mind, as the visitor thinks who can only speak to them in English. Most of them pick their way uncomfortably through English, slowly and heavily, without much expression. But listen to them speaking Gaelic, and you will notice that they speak with fire, speed, and dramatic variety. In the same way, when dealing with a foreigner, they appear very undemonstrative, but I have seen them greet their own near neighbors with a warmth of hand-clasping and kissing which we reserve for our relations back from the tropics. In many of them, their religion, especially the Free Church brand, has cramped their vitality. But a friend of mine who comes from Lewis tells me that in the typical Lewishman, Presbyterianism and Scottish respectability are only skin deep. Apply whiskey, and you will notice the resurgence of the Catholic and the Celt. Most books about the Highlands and Islands steep the landscape in uncontrolled purples and golds and sentimentalize the people. From what I have seen on my 2 visits, the landscape of the outer islands is not unusually rich or varied in color, and the people lack that more blatant surface charm or glamour, the sugared folkiness, which we are led to expect in out-of-the-way places by travelogues and geographical magazines. Nor are the Hebrideans good-looking. Their facial expression is more pleasing than that of the lowland Scot, but, like most Scots, their features are raw and imperfect. Some of the older women have a massive facial dignity due to prominent cheekbones and years of manual work. A few have a Madonna-like beauty, but the Madonna quality is usually lost by disproportionate length of chin and by the fact that they have ceased wearing the head shawl. The landscape also would be more striking if there were more winds, as there are in Ireland. But winds are discouraged as the sheep tend to get caught in them. Wild flowers are plentiful in July. Not being a flower lover proper, I preferred the larger effects. Emerald strips of oats coiling on the hills like snakes, or a 3-acre meadow purple with wild geraniums. Most visitors to the Hebrides comment pityingly on the inertia of the inhabitants who refuse to develop their lands scientifically or to apply modern methods of agriculture. But science presupposes a special education, and modern methods presuppose a great deal of money. Or do you expect that a crofter who finds it difficult to pay a rent of £2 a year will be able to get a steam tractor on credit and pay for it out of his profits? And in many parts of the Hebrides, it is doubtful whether modern methods would be applicable. No machine could tackle the rugged slopes which are turned by hand into lazy beds. I could not bear, in the fishing hotels, hearing people patronize the improvident natives whose lakes and rivers they were plundering. Yet it must be admitted that the islanders, like the southern Irish, show a disregard for time and for penny-in-the-slot efficiency. When I visited the annual sports at Barra in Lewis, an hour seemed regularly to elapse between one event and the next. And at some places the cows are not milked before 10 in the morning. There is a charming little poem directed at this trait of the Highlanders. Oh, that the peats might cut themselves, and the fish jump on the shore, that I might lie upon my bed, and sleep forevermore. It is perhaps fairer to take these lines as the expression of that dream of a Schlaraffenland, which is proper to all who work upon the land. Many people in the outer islands are Scottish nationalists. I had always laughed at Scottish nationalism as a precious affectation of bright young men with a distaste for real politics, but in the islands the concept has more meaning than it has in Edinburgh. Scotland as a whole will never regain a vital self-consciousness of her unity and individuality, but such a thing is still just possible for the Gaelic-speaking islands as a group, in separation from the mainland. Their traditional language needs no artificial cultivation. Their population is small enough to allow of a genuine community feeling. Their social life is still homogeneous, though commercialization may soon drive rifts through it. Lastly, the sea still separates them from their neighbors. In the words of Aeschylus, there is the sea, and who shall drain it dry? It would be absurd to suggest that the Hebrides should attempt to be self-supporting, economically independent. No one, as far as I know, has yet introduced there the bogey of beet sugar, with its accompanying chorus of rats. Some compromise, however, should be possible which would preserve the island's social and cultural independence. Economically, they should be allowed to adjust themselves to their bigger neighbors without kowtowing to them. I do not for a moment suggest that, in order to retain their language and community feeling, they should deliberately refuse the advantages of modernization. I met some Lewismen who deplored the recent establishment of bus services. Obviously, when a Lewisman can get from Uig to Ness any day of the week in 2 or 3 hours by bus, the old differences between the Ness man and the Uig man will become much less marked, and a certain amount that is locally of value will be lost. These local differences are much less important than what they have in common, or than what the inhabitants of the whole group of islands have in common and in contrast to most Scotsmen on the mainland. Some day it may be a good thing that the Hebrideans should lose their language and be in every way amalgamated with the rest of Scotland, or, as the case may be, with all the English-speaking races of the world. But that day is not yet. The ill effects of rapid Anglicization can be seen in the town of Stornoway. The crofter comes to town to swap his traditional rhythm and routine for the fussy mentality of Glasgow and the jazzy culture of an English public library. The Hebrides today do not suffer from poverty. As a crofter in Lewis said to me, "You can't really say in a crofting community that people are hard up, and if one man in a village finds it hard to get enough to eat, his neighbors will help him out." At the same time, unemployment and unsatisfactory conditions of labor are impoverishing the people spiritually. And while neither the overpopulation of Lewis nor the underpopulation of Skye presents a rural utopia, I have my doubts also about the Gaelic communities overseas. For 2 centuries, the natives of the Hebrides have been encouraged to emigrate, often by the false promises of hypocrite landlords. Dr. Johnson, in 1773, deplored the wholesale emigration which was then going on from the islands. It may be thought that they are happier by the change, but they are not happy as a nation, for they are a nation no longer. As they contribute not to the prosperity of any community, they must want that security, that dignity, that happiness, whatever it be, which a prosperous community throws back upon individuals. Samuel Johnson, A Journey to the Western Isles of Scotland.